نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Bismillah. Surah Al-Maarij. And this surah is Makki, and it has 44 ayat and 2 rukus. The word Ma'arij means stairways, and the name is given to this surah because in the beginning of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the ascent of angels and Jibreel alayhi salam. Another name given to this surah is Sa'ad, Surah Sa'ad. And what is the connection of this surah with the previous surah? So Surah Haqqa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the situation of the hereafter and also continues this description of Day of Judgment and Hell in this surah, Surah Ma'arij. Similarly, in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala depicts the condition of believers and sinners in the hereafter. Then, in terms of a high-level summary or synopsis, similar to other Makki surahs, the Surah Al-Maarij speaks about the fundamentals of true belief, and among them are the belief in the resurrection, reckoning, reward, and punishment. Also, the surah describes the qualities of devoted believers, such as establishing salah, spending on needy people, and fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remaining chaste. So let's begin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. A questioner has asked for the punishment that is going to befall. So notice here, Sa'ala also comes with Sa'ala an, which means ask about, and Sa'ala bi, which is in this surah, ask for. So here it is that a questioner has asked for the punishment that is going to befall. So who is mentioned here that is asking for punishment? Ibn Abbas says that this person was either Nadr bin Harith or Abu Jahl, and they were demanding Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to bring in the punishment. This similar topic comes in Surah Anfal, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالُوا اللَّهُمَّ إِنْ كَانَ هَذَا هُوَ الْحَقُّ مِنْ عِنْدِكَ فَأَمْطِرْ عَلَيْنَا حِجَارَةً مِنَ السَّمَاءِ أَوْ ائْتِنَا بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. And remember when they said, "O Allah, if this is indeed the truth from you, then rain down upon us stones from the heavens or bring upon us a painful punishment." So this was common. This is how disbelievers used to challenge Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they used to say, if you are indeed saying the truth, then bring the punishment now. What are you waiting for? So what happened in the case of Abu Jahl and Nadr bin Harith? So the punishment did come, but at the appointed time by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that happened in the Battle of Badr when they were killed. So that was a punishment that was awaiting for them and they have been calling for. Another explanation here is given that the Sa'ala is referring to Nuh alayhi salam, that he remained in his nation for almost 1,000 years, and then in the end he asked for punishment for his people. لِلْكَافِرِينَ لَيْسَ لَهُ دَافِعٌ. So it's connected to the previous ayah, واقعٌ, meaning it will happen, لِلْكَافِرِينَ, upon the disbelievers, which none can avert. So the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inevitable. It will certainly happen in this world, and if it doesn't happen here, then it will happen in the hereafter. For some, it may happen in both, and no one can protect when the punishment comes. There's no security and peace for that person. There's no escape for that person when the punishment is on by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah yumhilu wa la yuhmil. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives respite, but He does not neglect. Min Allah dhil Ma'arij. So from Allah, the Lord of the stairways. So let's focus on Ma'arij. There are different explanations given for this word. So Ma'arij is the plural of Mi'raj and means darajat, levels, or the staircase or ladder. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it comes here as a characteristic of sifa, it would mean the characteristic of ulu, or the highness. So Lord of stairways would mean Lord of high degree, as it is stated by Ibn Jubair. It can also mean the Lord of levels of heavens, one above the other, or the levels that angels climb up to him. So Ibn Masud says that these stairways are 7 heavens. They're referring to 7 heavens, one above the other. And Ibn Abbas says that Al-Maarij means this samawat, meaning Lord of the heavens. تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. The angels and the spirit will ascend to him during a day, the extent of which is 50,000 years. So let's look at the word ruh, and this is referring to Jibreel alayhi salam. And although you think about malaika, the word malaika includes Jibreel alayhi salam, but he's mentioned again afterwards as a ruh. And this is done to give special honor. And it's a principle in Balagha Tafseer ba'd al-ta'mim. So when you specifically mention something after a general mention of that same thing. So here, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Jibreel alayhi salam after Malaika, it is to give him a special honor. And that's why he's mentioned twice, once among the angels and once afterwards as being singled out. So one may think, well, how do we know that the word Ar-Ruh refers to Jibreel alayhi salam? So in Surah Shura, Nazala bihi Ar-Ruhul Amin, the trustworthy spirit has brought it down, meaning Quran. So we know Jibreel alayhi salam was the one who brought down Quran. And it is also mentioned that in Surah Shura, he's referred to as Ruhul Amin. The second part of the ayah, which is في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. And what that means is here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the day of judgment to be of 50,000 years long. And when we look for other references in the Quran about the day of judgment, you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Sajda, يدبر الأمر من السماء إلى الأرض ثم يعرج إليه في يوم كان مقداره 1000 سنة مما تعدون. So in this verse, in Surah Sajda, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the length of that day to be 1,000 years. So there seems to be a contradiction. Surah Al-Maarij is mentioning 50,000 years, and Surah Sajda mentions 1,000 years. When we look at a hadith in which it is narrated by Abu Sa'id Khudri, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said when he was asked about the length of the Day of Judgment, that it will measure 50,000 years. So Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam replied, I swear by the being in whose control is my life, the day for the believers will be lighter and less than the time during which they would perform an obligatory salah. So you can see, now we get the understanding of why it would be different for different people. So for the way to reconcile this difference is different groups of people will be feeling the length differently based on their own conditions. For believers, as it comes in this hadith, the duration will be lighter. It will be made easier, almost as if, the time spent in performing salah. However, for disbelievers, some of them, it will be like 1,000 years. And for yet another group of disbelievers, it will feel like 50,000 years. And this phenomenon is not uncommon. I mean, you also experience in this world, when you are in the company of a friend and you're enjoying that moment, time seems to go by fast. But if you are anxious about something, you're waiting for something to happen, the same time seems to have slowed down. So you could imagine in the Day of Judgment, believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. They will feel it very light, versus for disbelievers, it will be very hard and they will feel it very long. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. And we feel like the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said for believers, light and quick. Another point to note in this ayah is, it mentions about ta'arujul malaikatu wa ruh ilayhi, that the angels and the Jibreel alayhi salam go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So going up to him. So what does that mean? Does that mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is limited to a particular place? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not constrained by time and space. So the explanation ulama gave, and it comes as an example in Jalalain, which is a very famous tafsir, and I recommend people to read that tafsir. It comes in that explanation comes there that the way to understand it is angels actually go towards the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent the command for them to carry out. So that's what one of the explanations is. فَاصْبِرْ صَبْرًا جَمِيلًا. So be patient with a good patience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is advising Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be patient with these people who are challenging him to bring upon the wrath and punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already appointed a time for such punishment to happen. As we heard in the beginning of the surah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished Abu Jahl and Nadr bin Haris in Badr, and they were asking for it, and yet it had to happen when the Battle of Badr happened. إِنَّهُمْ يَرَوْنَهُ بَعِيدًا وَنَرَاهُ قَرِيبًا. So indeed, they see it as distant. So they see it distant, but we see it near. And what does yarawnahu is referring to? So what is it here? Well, they could see the punishment to be far, or they could see the resurrection or day of judgment to be far away. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we see it near. And here, far and near could refer to distance, but ulama say that they actually refer to the possibility of occurrence. So in the eyes of disbelievers and pagans, the day of judgment was an impossibility. Now, how could Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise people again? They just could not fathom that. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we see it for certain that it will happen. يَوْمَ تَكُونُ السَّمَاءُ كَالْمُهْلِ. On the day, the sky will be like murky oil. Muhl refers to a residue of oil. You know, when you cook something and you keep cooking, and you know how it gets dark and murky and kind of dirty. That's what muhl is. So here, subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving, an analogy of how the sky will become that day. وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْإِهْنِ. And the mountains will be like fluffy wool. So wool is already light, but when you make it fluffy, it becomes even lighter. So again, gives you the further meaning of how that day would be so concerning. That even mountains, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be destroying everything, and mountains which are, pegged today and, they do not move, that day they will be like flying around almost like a fluffy wool. وَلَا يَسَلُ حَمِيمٌ حَمِيمًا. And no friend will ask a friend. The word hamim means sincere friend. So due to the horror of Day of Judgment, close friends will forget each other. So we know also in Surah Abasa, it comes لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ شَأْنٌ يُغْنِي. On that day, each will be occupied with his own business, making him oblivious of everyone except himself. So that severity of the Day of Judgment is such that everyone will be only concerned about himself. In the next few ayahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes how no ransom would be accepted from a person, even if he offered all the people in the world, and even if he brought an entire earth full of gold as ransom. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is depicting here. A person would be so anxious, so desperate, they'll be offering up anything he could offer up in hopes that maybe that will save him, but that will not happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept that as a ransom and that this person free or forgive that day. يبصرونهم يود المجرم لو يفتدي من عذاب يومئذ ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه. Though they shall be made to see one another, the criminal would desire to ransom himself from the punishment of that day by his children, and his wife and his brother, and his nearest kin who sheltered him. So the word fasilatihi could mean that person's tribe or his kin, his close relatives. Ikrimah says that it refers to the subdivision of his tribe that he's from. And another opinion is that it means his mother. So this person will try to offer his dearest family members, his tribesmen, in the hopes to escape the punishment. And not only that, as it comes in the next ayah, وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ يُنْجِي. So he will also try to offer, as the ayah says, and all that are in the earth, so that it might save him, in the hopes that if I offer everything that is in this earth, I might get saved. Kalla. That's the response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kalla innaha lada. No, indeed, it will be the hellfire. Nazza'atan lishawa, and a remover of exteriors. Let's understand this word shawa. Ibn Abbas and Mujahid says it means the skin of the head. Hassan Basri said it means the respectable part of the face. Qatada says it means important organs like face and limbs. And the heart says it means the flesh and the skin. So all of this basically is explaining the torture, the punishment, the agonizing and excruciating pain that will be imposed upon the disbelievers, to the point where it's almost you're skinning the animal. Today in this world, you do that after slaughtering, it will be happening to them live. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from that moment. Ameen. تَدْعُو مَنْ أَدْبَرَ وَتَوَلَّى. It invites he who turned his back on truth and went away from obedience. So this will happen to a person who turned his back on truth, did not accept it. And he was asked to oblige and obey, and instead he ran away. وَجَمَعَ فَأَوْعَى. And he collected wealth and hoarded it. So the word jama'a means to accumulate wealth without lawful means. So when someone unlawfully accumulates wealth, that's what is referred to here as jama'a. And aw'a means hoarding. And you can think of this as not fulfilling the rights of the wealth. So not giving zakat. It comes in Bukhari. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to Asma radiallahu anha, أنفقي ولا تحصي فيحصي الله عليك ولا توعي فيوعي الله عليك. So spend and do not calculate. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would calculate in your case. And do not hoard, otherwise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be withholding from you. So when you're spending, be generous. Don't count the pennies, the dollars, the rupees that you are spending, or pounds. Don't count the money. Do not withhold anything back. Give. Because if you start collecting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will start withholding his bounties to you. This is such an encouragement on spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know the reward of spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it comes in Surah Baqarah. مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ حَبَّةٍ أَنْبَتَتْ سَبْعَ سَنَابِلَ فِي كُلِّ سُنبُلَةٍ مِئَةُ حَبَّةٍ وَاللَّهُ يُضَاعِفُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. The example of those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah is like a seed of grain which grows 7 spikes, and each spike is 100 grain. And Allah multiplies his reward for whom he wills. And Allah is all-encompassing and knowing. So let's look at the summary of these first 18 ayahs. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us the day of judgment is near. They may think about the day of judgment being too far, but it's actually quite near. It's bound to happen. And we have to remain patient in the path of obedience. You find many obstacle challenges come your way. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, being the last prophet, the best of human creation, the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he had to face challenges in this path. So when you are trying to be on the straight path, challenges will come and you have to remain patient. The horrors of the day of judgment. And of course, we have heard them in the previous surah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them. And similarly in this surah as well, that this is the punishment that will be given to people who are sinners, who are disbelievers, is unbearable. Naza'at al-shawab, the skins peeled off. So very severe torment. And it may not cross our mind on a daily basis, but that's something we have to always remember. If we do not change our actions today, if we do not change our behavior today, it could lead to such a punishment, even if it is for a moment. As I said, in Jahannam, it will still be very severe. Allah Ta'ala protect us from that situation. I mean, and then of course, condemnation of those who disobey and hoard. So the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was to give, and especially now that Ramadan is coming, we should be planning to give more. And that was also the habit of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He used to give throughout the year, but in Ramadan, he was extra generous. So let's be ready to spend in the path of Allah. And of course, we believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give barakah in spending. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq to understand what has been said and change our course of action so that we could earn His pleasure. Amen. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم.